Welcome to the deep dive. We all spend a lot of time trying to figure out what separates the people who really soar from those who struggle. What's that secret sauce for success?
Right, and we often jump to conclusions, don't we? We think it's got to be just raw talent or maybe, having the perfect environment growing up.
Exactly. But our source material today, it suggests something a bit different. Maybe the single most important factor isn't just the traits you're born with.
It's more about the foundational belief system you hold about those traits. It's like your core philosophy, your internal operating system, really. And that dictates how you tackle challenges, relationships, failures, pretty much everything.
So that's the concept we're diving into today, the mindset framework. Our mission here is to unpack the research, the studies that explain why some people seem to just thrive on pressure, on steep learning curves.
While others who might be just as talented on paper, they just shut down or crumble when things get tough.
Yeah. We're going deep into the fixed versus the growth mindset.
And the origin story, I think you'll find this fascinating. It wasn't cooked up in some, fancy lab initially. It actually came from watching kids struggling with puzzles.
Puzzles. Okay, tell me more.
So the researcher, she was trying to understand how people cope with failure. Simple enough goal, right? So they set up this test. Puzzles started easy, then got progressively ridiculously difficult, like designed to be too hard.
Okay. So the difficulty was the real point. How did the kids react?
Well, most reacted exactly how you'd predict.
Yeah.
Frustration, grunting, maybe looking around to blame someone or trying to sneak peek at the answers. They basically saw the difficulty as proof.
Proof that they weren't smart enough.
Exactly, proof of a fixed limit. But then there was this one kid, an anomaly, a 10-year-old boy.
And what did he do?
When he hit those really hard problems, the ones tripping everyone else up, he didn't back away. He actually pulled his chair closer to the desk, rubbed his hands together, and basically said, yes, I was hoping this would be challenging.
Wow. Okay, at 10 years old, that's pretty profound.
Isn't it? That shift in perspective, he wasn't seeing it as a judgment, a test of his fixed IQ or whatever.
He just saw it as a chance to learn something new.
Precisely. An opportunity to acquire a skill. That unexpected, almost joyful embrace of difficulty right when failure seemed likely. That's the bedrock. That's the foundation of this whole mindset framework we're talking about.
Okay, so let's break down these two mindsets then. Fundamentally, it sounds like two totally different ways of looking at human ability. Let's start with the one that seems to cause more anxiety, the fixed mindset, FM.
Right. The fixed mindset. It's built on this core belief that your basic qualities, intelligence, artistic talent, leadership ability, even personality, are just static. They're fixed traits, set in stone.
So if you hold this view, you basically agree with the statement. You have a certain amount of intelligence, and you can't really do much to change it. Is that the gist?
That's the core of it. And if you believe that, well, suddenly the stakes for everything you do become incredibly high. Because your main driver, your primary motivation, becomes this constant, urgent need to prove that your fixed allotment of ability is, well, good enough. Preferably above average.
So you're always performing.
Yeah.
Always trying to demonstrate you're smart or talented or competent. That sounds exhausting.
It is. And this is where it starts to kind of negatively impact things. Because if every single action is basically a test of your fundamental worth,
then mistakes aren't just mistakes. They're threats.
Existential threats, exactly. Failure isn't just, oops, I messed up. It's catastrophic proof that you fundamentally are lacking, which naturally leads to this intense hypersensitivity about being wrong or making errors.
Okay, I can see how that would absolutely cripple learning if you're terrified of looking bad.
You avoid challenges, right? And you distort reality to protect that fragile sense of competence. Successes, those get magnified. I'm brilliant because I succeeded.
Yeah.
Failures, minimized, explained away, blamed on anything external.
The test is unfair, my boss is an idiot, that kind of thing.
Precisely.
Yeah.
You actively block accurate feedback because accurate feedback might reveal a flaw in your precious fixed traits. You're basically in constant impression management mode, not learning mode.
Okay, so that's the fixed mindset. Let's pivot. What's the alternative view? The growth mindset, or GM. How does that change the game?
It shifts everything. The growth mindset operates on the core belief that those cherished qualities, intelligence, creativity, you name it, aren't static gifts. They can be cultivated, developed, significantly enhanced.
Wow.
Through dedication, effort, good strategies, input from others,
Right.
training. It reframes the whole purpose of life, really. It's not about proving you're smart. It's about getting smarter, improving.
And if you genuinely believe you can improve, then suddenly information, even negative feedback, becomes
It's
valuable.
exactly. You need accurate information. A mistake isn't some verdict on your character. It's just data, diagnostic data.
Okay, I messed that up. Thanks for showing me where I need to focus my effort next. That kind of reaction.
That's the GM perspective. The whole motivational engine is different. The goal is learning. And to learn effectively, you absolutely have to know where you stand right now, warts and all.
So you almost welcome criticism, or at least you see its value.
You see it as a tool for advancement, not an attack on who you are. It's information to fuel growth.
This really brings up that classic debate, though, doesn't it? Nature versus nurture. Are we saying genes are irrelevant with the growth mindset?
Not at all. And that's important. The sources are clear. Modern science has really moved past that rigid.
Either it's not nature or nurture.
Right. Experts agree it's a constant interaction. Genes and environment are always talking to each other. There's this eminent neuroscientist, Gilbert Gottlieb, who put it perfectly. He said genes actually require input from the environment to even work properly.
So you might have a genetic predisposition, say, for music.
But if you never hear music, never pick up an instrument, never put in the hours of, frankly, grinding practice, that predisposition just lies dormant. It doesn't automatically blossom.
So we don't all start at the same point. We do have different aptitudes, different genetic leanings.
Absolutely. But what the growth mindset really highlights is that things like experience, training, mentorship, and sheer effort, these are the mechanisms. They're what activate and truly maximize whatever potential is there.
Robert Sternberg, the intelligence researcher, he said something similar, right, about purposeful engagement.
Yes, exactly. He found that the major factor in achieving real expertise isn't some fixed ability you start with, but that sustained, focused, purposeful engagement over time.
Which leads to what you called a liberating insight from the growth mindset, something about potential.
Ah, yes. The unknowability of potential. This is key.
Unknowability. That sounds counterintuitive. Society spends so much time trying to measure potential, right? IQ tests, SATs, performance reviews.
Right. But the GM perspective argues that a person's true ultimate potential is fundamentally unknown and unknowable. Why? Because it's impossible to foresee what can happen when someone combines years, even decades, of passion, strategic effort, learning from failures, and just sheer hard work.
So those early metrics, the test scores, they're just snapshots.
Exactly. A snapshot of where you are now in your development. They're not a final verdict on your ultimate ceiling. The growth mindset basically says there might not be a fixed ceiling in the way we usually think about it.
And when you look back historically, you see this, don't you? We tend to think giants of history were just born brilliant.
But the evidence says otherwise. Think about Charles Darwin or Leo Tolstoy. Reports from their childhood suggest they were considered pretty ordinary kids, not destined for greatness from day one.
Their genius was forged over time through intense work and curiosity.
Absolutely. Decades of it. Or look at skills. Ben Hogan, one of the greatest golfers ever, described as utterly uncoordinated, even graceless when he was young.
Really? Hogan? Wow.
And the famous photographer Cindy Sherman. She actually failed her first photography course.
No way. Failed it.
Yep. And think about acting. Geraldine Page, a legendary actress, was told point blank early in her career she lacked talent and should just give up.
These examples really drive it home. Your starting point matters way less than your commitment to the journey, to the process.
Precisely. The fixed idea that you can measure true quality early on creates this artificial ceiling. The growth belief just removes it. It allows for the possibility of incredible transformation, sometimes much later in life than we expect.
Okay, this really starts to clarify why people behave so differently when the stakes are high. Let's talk about effort. How do the two mindsets see the simple act of trying?
Effort. This is one of the starkest dividing lines. For someone with a fixed mindset, effort is often seen as, well, a bad thing, a negative signal.
Meaning, if you have to try hard, it must mean you don't have the natural gift. You aren't a natural.
Exactly. Real geniuses in the FM view shouldn't need to sweat. It should just flow effortlessly.
And we see this reflected in culture, right? This obsession with effortless perfection. We love the myth of the musician or the athlete who just rolled out of bed amazing.
We do. Think Midori, Michael Jordan, Picasso. The narrative we prefer is that they just popped out fully formed, bypassing all the struggle.
But that creates a huge vulnerability, doesn't it? If effort exposes you as maybe not having the magic gift.
You avoid it, especially in public. You don't want to be seen trying too hard. But for the growth mindset, the relationship with effort is completely different. It's virtuous.
They see effort as the key. the thing that turns potential into actual accomplishment.
Exactly. Effort is what ignites ability. They admire effort, sometimes even more than just raw talent.
And if you dig into the stories of those supposed naturals,
Right.
the reality is often staggering amounts of effort. You mentioned Mozart.
Right. We focus on his genius, but his letters, his life, they reveal relentless work, practicing until his hands were literally deformed from the strain. The effort was immense, but for him it wasn't a sign of deficiency, it was the engine.
Okay, and this connects directly to the ultimate test, failure. How do the mindsets handle it when things go wrong?
For the fixed mindset, as we touched on, failure is just devastating because it morphs. It goes from being an action, I failed that test, into an identity, I am a failure.
That sounds incredibly stressful. One bad grade, one project that flops, and suddenly your whole self-worth is on the line. It must create this constant background hum of anxiety.
It really does. The source material gives this really poignant example of a woman named Loretta. Decades later, decades after taking some kind of entrance test for kindergarten.
Kindergarten. Seriously?
Yes, she still carried this deep conviction that she wasn't a true eagle. That was the label for the top group back then. An assessment at age 5 was still defining her core ability in her mind 20 years later.
That's a test score is forever anxiety right there. Wow.
And that fear, the fear of getting that negative label stuck to you, it can be so powerful that people with a fixed mindset will actually sabotage their own futures to avoid it.
By avoiding challenges.
Exactly. Or by avoiding help. There's this study from the University of Hong Kong. English is the language of instruction there, but obviously not everyone comes in fluent.
Okay.
The university offered an optional remedial English course for students who needed it. Now, you'd think students struggling would jump at the chance, right?
Logically, yes. It would help them succeed in their actual degree courses.
But the students who tested higher on fixed mindset beliefs, even if they knew their English was weak, were significantly less likely to sign up for the course.
Why? Just because taking it meant admitting they weren't already good enough.
Precisely. Admitting a deficiency. Accepting that label, even temporarily. They would rather risk failing their entire degree later than risk damaging their fixed image of competence right now.
That's wow. So the growth mindset presumably flips this entirely.
Completely. It severs that toxic link between performance and identity. Failure isn't you. It's just a problem, a puzzle to be solved, something to be faced, dealt with, and most importantly, learned from.
It informs your next move rather than defining your character.
Exactly. Think about Jim Marshall, the Minnesota Vikings player.
Vaguely. The name rings a bell.
He had this incredibly famous, embarrassing moment. High-stakes game, national TV. He recovered a fumble and ran 66 yards the wrong way. Scored a safety for the other team.
Oh, that Jim Marshall. Yeah, I remember that play.
That was
Utterly humiliating.
the lowest point imaginable for a professional athlete. But Marshall didn't let that define him as, the idiot who ran the wrong way. He acknowledged the devastation, but used it. Used it as fuel to prove his resilience, his focus, his commitment for the rest of his long career. It became a defining moment of overcoming, not of permanent failure.
So the GM perspective allows people to push boundaries, even when things seem impossible, to stretch beyond current limits.
Beautifully put. And you see this incredibly clearly in the story of Christopher Reeve.
Superman, after his accident.
Right. After the paralyzing horseback riding accident in '95, the medical consensus was overwhelming. Recovery of movement was impossible. He was told, essentially, accept your fixed fate. This is it.
But he didn't accept it?
He didn't. Driven by this core growth mindset question, why couldn't he learn to move again? He embarked on this incredibly intense, demanding exercise and physical therapy regimen, often against the advice of doctors who thought he was just in denial.
Was it just denial? Or was it something else?
It wasn't magical thinking, that's key. He framed it like a scientific experiment. He believed, based on emerging ideas about neuroplasticity, that the brain and nervous system weren't totally fixed, that they could potentially rewire themselves if given the right, intense, directed input.
So he was testing a hypothesis, essentially. The hypothesis that growth was possible even after catastrophic injury.
Exactly. And after about 5 years of this relentless, grueling effort, he began to regain small but definite voluntary movements. First a finger, then more. It defied the medical expectations of the time.
So the growth mindset didn't magically heal him, but it gave him the framework, the belief system to pursue a path that did lead to unexpected physical change.
Precisely. It provided the rationale for the effort, the hypothesis that the body wasn't immutable, and the results, however incremental, were this powerful validation of that GM principle in the face of just absolute adversity.
Let's shift this framework into those really competitive arenas,
Hmm.
like sports and business. The differences there must be stark. You mentioned something about the curse of the natural in sports.
Yes, the sources really dig into this. The idea is that having exceptional, almost effortless, innate talent early on, if it cultivates a fixed mindset, can actually become a major handicap later.
How does that work? Seems counterintuitive.
The prime example given is Billy Bean, the Moneyball guy. In high school, he was it, the superstar. Amazing at baseball, basketball, quarterback, just pure natural talent, drafted high by the Mets.
Okay, sounds like the dream scenario.
But then he hit the majors. Suddenly, everyone around him was also incredibly talented, and he started to struggle, which he'd never really done before.
And his fixed mindset kicked in. Interpreted struggle as meaning he just didn't have it.
Exactly, that's the curse. Because everything had come so easily, he'd never developed the coping mechanisms, never learned how to handle failure, how to grind, how to adjust. One scout said Bean believed he should never make an out.
So when he did struggle, he couldn't handle it.
He'd lash out, break things. He was convinced the problem wasn't his strategy or his effort, but some fundamental flaw in him. He didn't know how to fail, so the threat of imperfection basically paralyzed him. His amazing talent never fully bloomed at the pro level.
What a waste, in a way. And you contrast him with,
This
was that Lenny Dykstra?
Yeah, his teammate for a while. Dykstra was, objectively less physically gifted than Bean, shorter, maybe less raw power. But Bean apparently watched him with a kind of awe,
Why? What did Dykstra have?
grit, intensity. And crucially, the sources say Dykstra had no concept of failure. Not that he never failed, obviously, but it didn't define him.
He just moved on to the next play, next at bat.
Right, he knew he had to work his tail off for everything. A strikeout was just a strikeout, not a verdict. He embodied that growth mindset on the field.
And Bean, later as a manager, that experience shaped his whole Moneyball philosophy.
Absolutely. He realized his mistake had been valuing that fragile, natural talent, the fixed mindset approach. He started looking for players based on process, resilience, on-base percentage, metrics that reflected a more growth-oriented approach to the game. Mindset over just raw talent.
It also makes you rethink figures like Babe Ruth, doesn't it? The myth is he just rolled out of bed and hit home runs.
That myth totally ignores the work ethic. Early in his career, Ruth was actually pretty inconsistent, despite the obvious power. He wasn't a natural in the sense of being perfect from day one.
So he had to work at it.
Tremendously. Especially later, when his career seemed to dip, he committed to really intense off-season workouts. And crucially, he apparently loved daily practice. The story goes that veteran players resented him because he'd stay out taking batting practice long after they'd quit for the day.
That sounds like someone focused on learning and improving, not just relying on a gift.
Exactly. That's the GM signature.
And this focus on innate talent, it's just as prevalent, maybe even more so, in the business world. Malcolm Gladwell called it the talent mindset.
Yes, that became a real orthodoxy in many corporations, didn't it? This obsession with finding and hiring the naturals, the instant superstars.
But this can lead to really damaging leadership, according to the sources. Fixed mindset CEOs.
Absolutely. They're often characterized by this deep personal need to constantly prove their own superiority. Think Albert Dunlap at Sunbeam Chainsaw Al, famous for brutal cost cutting, but it ultimately led to accounting scandals and collapse. He was proving he was tough, not necessarily building sustainable value.
Or Lee Iacocca at Chrysler.
Yeah.
His story is interesting.
Very. After being fired by Henry Ford II, his drive to save Chrysler seemed massively fueled by this personal vendetta, this need to prove his greatness on the biggest stage possible.
So his focus wasn't purely on the business fundamentals.
His fixed mindset seemed to push him towards prioritizing things that showcased his success, his public image, bestseller books, boosting the stock price in the short term, rather than maybe the harder, less glamorous work of really investing in long-term product quality or innovation. It was about proving Iacocca was great.
And this need to prove yourself right all the time.
Yeah.
It leads to what the sources call CEO disease.
Right. FM leaders tend to surround themselves with yes men, people who won't challenge them. They create this bubble where their brilliance is constantly affirmed.
And they actively avoid bad news, because bad news implies they might have been wrong.
Exactly. Deficiencies are seen as personal failures. The classic, almost unbelievable example cited is the A&P grocery chain, once the world's largest retailer.
What
They
happened?
were slow to adapt to supermarkets. When they finally did experiment with a new, successful superstore format, management actually shut it down
Shut down a successful store.
because it wasn't their initial vision. It contradicted their fixed strategy. They rejected the positive evidence because it didn't fit their preconceived notion of what should work. They'd rather fail than admit their fixed plan needed changing.
That's incredible. So contrast that with growth mindset leaders. Jim Collins' good to great study found something different.
Very different. Collins found the most effective leaders, the ones who took companies from good to truly great, were often quite self-effacing, humble even, but they had this fierce resolve combined with a willingness to confront the brutal facts of their reality, however unpleasant.
That sounds like the GM openness to accurate information again.
Exactly. Openness to criticism, combined with this unwavering faith that they would prevail in the end. That's pure growth mindset.
Lou Gerstner turning around IBM is a great example of that shift in practice, isn't it?
Perfect example. When Gerstner arrived at IBM, the culture was famously smug, elitist, locked in internal battles. Very fixed mindset, everyone protecting their turf, proving their division was best. Wall Street initially wrote him off because the stock didn't jump immediately.
But he saw the problem wasn't just financial.
He realized it was cultural, deeply ingrained fixed mindset beliefs. So he focused on changing that. He pushed for collaboration, for learning from mistakes, for focusing on customer needs instead of internal status.
Shifting from proving rank to improving collective performance.
Exactly. It was about cultivating a growth culture. And that fundamental shift, not just tweaking finances, is what allowed IBM to eventually regain its footing and thrive again. It took time, but it addressed the root cause.
So this mindset doesn't just dictate how we perform at work or in sports. It fundamentally shapes our personal lives too, right? Our relationships.
Absolutely. It permeates everything. Let's look at how the fixed mindset plays out in romance because it sets up some real traps.
The happily ever after trap, as the sources call it. What's that about?
It's this fixed mindset ideal that true love means instant, perfect, perpetual compatibility, that it was meant to be feeling. And the core belief underneath is, if it's real, it shouldn't require hard work.
So if you hit bumps in the road, if you have disagreements.
The FM conclusion is often, well, I guess this wasn't meant to be. This expectation of automatic, effortless harmony is incredibly destructive.
Because real relationships do take work.
Tons of work. All the major relationship experts like Aaron Beck or John Gottman, they're unanimous on this. Successful long-term relationships require constant effort, learning how to communicate, navigating differences, compromising. The idea that you shouldn't have to work at it is a recipe for failure. People work happily ever after, as one expert put it.
Okay, so that's problem number one. The unrealistic expectation of no effort. What's the second problem with the FM in relationships?
It's how you interpret flaws when they inevitably appear, because nobody's perfect, right? But if you believe core traits are fixed,
Then any flaw you see in your partner isn't just a behavior. It's evidence of their fixed, unchanging personality.
exactly. So if your partner is moody sometimes, the FM thinking isn't, maybe they had a bad day, or maybe we need better ways to handle stress. It jumps to, Brenda is just a fundamentally boring person, or Jack is inherently selfish.
And if you think the flaw is fixed and fundamental,
You get angry. You feel contempt. Because you can't fix a fixed trait, you can only judge it or resent it. This leads straight down the path to relationship breakdown.
the sources mentioned a woman, Penelope, who kept rejecting guys for tiny flaws.
Right, a perfect illustration. She'd meet great guys, feel that initial spark, that meant-to-be feeling, but then she'd spot some minor imperfection. One guy used too much ketchup, another wore white shoes she didn't like.
Seriously, ketchup and white shoes.
Yep. In her fixed mindset view, these weren't just trivial habits, they were signs. Signs of fundamental incompatibility, proof that he wasn't the perfect, flawless match she believed was out there. So she'd dump them and keep searching.
Instead of seeing them as, just quirks or things you could talk about or accept.
Exactly. There's a great quote from relationship expert Daniel Weil that offers the growth mindset perspective. He basically says choosing a partner means choosing a particular set of problems. Every relationship will have them.
So the goal isn't to find someone with no problems, but to find someone whose set of problems you're willing to work on together.
That's the GM view. It acknowledges limitations in yourself, your partner, the relationship itself, but sees them as developmental challenges, not fixed verdicts.
So the growth mindset in love views, everything is capable of growth. Yourself, your partner, the relationship dynamic itself.
Pretty much. Differences aren't fatal flaws. They're opportunities to learn and adapt. If communication is poor, the GM question isn't, why is my partner so bad at talking? It's, what communication strategies can we learn and practice together? It shifts from blame to collaboration.
This connects really well to parenting, doesn't it? And how we give feedback to kids. We often think praising intelligence builds confidence.
It seems intuitive, right? You're so smart, you're natural. We think we're boosting their self-esteem.
But the research shows the opposite.
Consistently. Praising innate intelligence actually harms motivation and performance down the line. Kids quickly learn that the smart label is precious and also precarious.
So they get scared of losing it.
Exactly. To protect that label, they start avoiding challenges. They choose the easy tasks where they know they'll succeed, so they don't risk making a mistake that might disprove their smartness. It makes them fragile.
So what's the alternative? What should we praise?
The process. Praise the effort they put in. Praise the strategies they used, even if they didn't fully succeed. Praise their persistence, their focus, their improvement. Reward the behaviors that lead to learning, not just a static trait or a successful outcome.
There was an example in the sources about a young gymnast named Elizabeth.
Yes, a great example. She was really upset after a competition where she didn't win any ribbons. Lost pretty badly.
And how did her father handle it? Did he say, "Oh, honey, you're still the best gymnast to me"?
No, he didn't offer false praise. But he also didn't dismiss her feelings. He was honest, but focused entirely on the process and effort.
What did he say?
Something like, look, Elizabeth, I know you're disappointed, but honestly, you haven't really earned it yet. There are girls here today who've been doing gymnastics much longer than you, and frankly, they've worked a lot harder than you have so far. If winning ribbons is something you truly want, then it's something you're going to have to really commit to working for.
Wow, that's direct. But it's not attacking her talent, is it? It's about effort and experience.
Exactly. He framed it as controllable. Success wasn't about having some innate gymnast gene. It was about controllable actions, more practice, better strategies, more dedication. And apparently that honest, growth-oriented feedback motivated her completely. She doubled down on her training because she saw the path forward was through effort.
It reinforced that ability is something you create, not just something you have.
Perfectly said.
And this idea that our abilities, even our intelligence, aren't fixed. It's not just psychology, is it? There's actual brain science behind this now.
Absolutely. This isn't just wishful thinking. The science of neuroplasticity backs it up. There was this program called Brainology, mentioned in the sources.
Brainology, what did it teach kids?
It taught them how the brain actually works, not as a fixed entity, but as a dynamic organ. It showed them that when you challenge yourself, when you learn new hard things like, say, algebra or a foreign language, your brain physically changes.
Yeah.
Your neurons form new connections. They get stronger, they multiply. Learning makes your brain literally grow. Effort isn't just something you do, it physically makes you smarter, increases your intellectual capacity.
And knowing this actually helped the students.
Significantly. The kids who learned about brain plasticity and adopted more of a growth mindset showed a clear, measurable improvement in their grades compared to the control group. Understanding that effort builds the brain was incredibly motivating.
Okay, so the good news is mindsets aren't fixed either. They can be changed. If someone listening recognizes themselves in the fixed mindset descriptions, maybe they hear that internal voice of judgment, that scared Sally or dumping Dan persona. What are the practical steps to shift towards growth?
The sources lay out a really concrete 4-step process for change. It's quite actionable.
Okay, step one.
Step 1 is just awareness. Learn to recognize your fixed mindset triggers. When do you feel most judged? When does that internal critic flare up? And what does it actually say? Listen to that monologue. You're going to fail. You're not good enough for this. Don't even try. You'll just embarrass yourself. Just notice it. Recognize that is the FM voice.
Okay, recognize the trigger, hear the voice. Step 2.
Give that voice, that FM persona, a name, like dumping Dan if it always tells you to bail on relationships, or critic Carl, or fearful Fred, whatever resonates.
Why give it a name?
It helps you externalize it, to see it as a part of you, maybe a protective or fearful part, but not the whole you. It creates a little distance so you don't have to automatically fuse with that voice. It's just Carl being critical again, you know?
Right, you can observe it rather than just be swept away by it. Okay, step 3.
Educate that persona. Talk back to it using the logic of the growth mindset. When fearful Fred whispers, "Don't take that promotion, you'll fail," you can consciously respond internally. "Look, Fred, I know you're trying to protect me, but ability is grown through challenge. This is an opportunity to learn, not just a test to pass or fail. Remember the brain science. Effort builds capacity. You actively counter the FM narrative with GM facts.
So you're reasoning with that part of yourself? And step 4, this sounds like where the action happens.
Step 4 is crucial for actual behavior change. Create and commit to concrete implementation intentions. This is more powerful than just vaguely deciding, I'll try to be more growth-minded.
What does an implementation intention look like?
It uses a specific if-then structure. You anticipate a likely trigger situation, the if, and pre-plan your specific desired growth mindset response, the then.
Can you give an example?
Sure. Instead of just saying, I need to handle criticism better, you'd create an intention like, if my boss gives me critical feedback on my report, then I will take a deep breath, thank them for the input, and immediately ask at least one specific question about how I could improve it next time, instead of getting defensive or shutting down.
Ah, I see. So you're defining the exact cue and the exact replacement behavior in advance.
Exactly. The power is that it links the trigger directly to the desired action. It makes the grown-oriented response more automatic, more likely to override your default FM reaction, especially when you're feeling stressed or vulnerable in the moment. It takes the decision-making out of the heat of the moment.
That seems incredibly practical.
Yeah.
So wrapping this all up, this deep dive really underscores that maybe the most powerful tool we have isn't the talent we start with.
But the belief system we choose to adopt about that talent, and about challenge, effort, and failure.
The difference feels profound. The fixed mindset seems focused on being somebody proving you have innate superior qualities.
While the growth mindset goal is much more about the journey, it's about growing, finding the satisfaction, even the joy, in the process of learning and stretching yourself, regardless of where you started.
So the choice really rests with you, the listener, doesn't it? Do you want to spend your energy protecting a fixed image, polishing those perceived talents like trophies you dare not risk?
Or do you want to look back like the tennis great Billie Jean King suggested and be able to say, you know what, I gave my absolute all for the things I truly valued. Win or lose, succeed or fail, the effort and the growth were the real prize.
And knowing that when those setbacks inevitably hit, when obstacles seem insurmountable, the growth mindset is always there. It's always an option.
It always shows you a path forward, a path built not on some fragile idea of genius,